Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Wanted to thank you for joining me in the Donor Relations Guru webinar. Today, we will talk about recognition. We're going to talk about donor recognition, getting past honor rolls, gifts, walls, and other things that we in donors sometimes abhor, depending on the donor. You should be able to hear me loud and clear right now. In addition to watching this live, you can also view the recording. So I'm recording this right now, and then usually the recording process is overnight, and you will receive it tomorrow morning along with a copy of the slides. If you didn't already receive a copy of the slides previously. So we're really going to get started. We have a good number of folks today to finish the year off. Just a little announcement, a little housekeeping. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box, and I'll try to get to them as we go along today. If not, I'll leave some time at the end for questions as well. And you can tweet at Donor Guru for those of you who love to tweet. And wanted to make an announcement for those of you who don't know. As of December 1st, I went and left my job at UNC Charlotte, and I'm now Donor Relations Guru full-time, so doing consulting and speaking full-time as of December. So it's my first full week on my own. So I found out I'm a horrible boss and that I work too much. But other than that, thank you, Mark. Other than that, it's a great week. I'm excited to devote more of myself and my time to you guys. You're going to have some more features available to you, especially the subscribers. We're going to do some live chats and some Google Hangouts where you can basically have some free consulting and pick my brain whenever you'd like. So full-time consulting and speaking. And yes, for those of you wondering, I do have a cold because I just thought I'd pick up something on the flight home from Denver. So just in case. All right, we are going to talk about recognition today. And it's funny, I was preparing these slides in the middle of the night last night because, that's the best working time for me. And if you Google donor recognition, I thought it was interesting. If you Google donor recognition and you click on images, all the donor recognition items that you see are physical. And so I think that Google has a shallow view of what it is we do in donor recognition. But this is what happens when you Google donor recognition and you hit images. You can see you've got lots of different types of images, but that most of them represent physical recognition. And today we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about so much more. So one of the things I'd like us to consider today is, as we think about recognition as one of the 4 pillars of donor relations, remember we have 4 pillars. We have acknowledgement, stewardship, recognition, and engagement. And as we look at recognition, I think it's one of the kind of places where we don't have clear lines about who the recognition is for. Ideally, we say that donors want recognition, and that's why we're doing it. But sometimes I feel like we do recognition in donor relations because it also makes our organizations look good. And so I want us to make sure that when we think about recognition, that we think about a donor-centered approach to recognition, and that we're really doing things that benefit the donors that give so generously to us. One of the commentaries I constantly make about donor relations is that donors have both needs and wants, and we must take care of their needs with things like transparency and reporting and showing them the impact of their gift and being grateful, but that they really want the following 3 things: access, information, and experiences. And we need to figure out how recognition fits in with those 3 things. What donors' needs are from us and how we provide them for them in a holistic measure. Now, today we're going to speak generally about donors, but also understand that depending on the type of organization you are, depending on the type of donor you have, they either will want a lot of public recognition or maybe they're more private about their giving. It all depends. I can tell you that privacy is becoming an increasing concern for a lot of us. For example, when I made my scholarship gift to my alma mater, the University of South Carolina, proud Gamecock, I have to mention that in every webinar, otherwise I feel like I'm going to get a note from that says you didn't mention us, but when I made my gift, I was happy to have it publicized, but I didn't want the amount mentioned. I thought that that was not really what I wanted tied to my name. I wanted the legacy of my family tied to my name, but I didn't really want the amount. So they were very, very respectful in honoring my wishes for recognition that way. So let's look at traditional ways in which we used to, and kind of um, the way many people think of donor recognition when we talk about it with our leadership sometimes, and that's honor rolls, which is basically a donor listing for those of you, list of names, walls and plaques, so permanent recognition, physical recognition, giving societies, which is groups of donors who've given in a certain amount, and so we're recognizing them by giving them a fancy title and a lapel pin, and then tchotchkes. Those are traditional methods of donor recognition. And I want us to challenge the idea that that traditional way is the right thing to do. I have this lovely demotivational sign here that I like to use. I always have it up in my office. I tend to think that recognition is the one place in donor relations where we're least innovative and where things have changed the least. And so I'd like to challenge those assumptions today, that just because we've always done it that way doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way. My friend Mary Solomons, who I love dearly, calls it waditwa, which is we've always done it that way. And just because you've always done something that way doesn't mean that it's best practice. So let's challenge those traditions today together, and we're going to talk about how to talk to our leadership about actually making changes, because those of you who work in nonprofit and higher ed know that we are literally, physically, I really think we are, there's got to be some law that says that we are completely risk adverse, because we really don't like change. We don't like doing things differently in nonprofit and higher ed. And so sometimes it's hard to convince people that it's okay to change a tradition, or it's okay to move forward with a different idea. And I am the queen of moving forward with different. So here we go. So some of the concerns of traditional donor recognition are, even more so now than ever, the IRS, understanding that there are tax guidelines, and that the quid pro quo law keeps changing every year. The IRS is discouraging us from giving token items or tchotchkes, and they have changed their rules every year to become more and more restrictive. That's IRS, for these of you in the United States, sorry Canadians, you don't have to listen to this, take a nap, but that's document 526. This year it's on page 19. It gives you the guidelines, which is basically very restrictive. They're basically telling you not to give token items to your donors. There's also a study that says that every time you give a token item to a donor, their giving decreases. And you can find that study on my website, or I can send you the link, whichever one you'd like. The appearance of waste. Ever since the economic downturn of 2008, our donors have been more and more conscious about what we're spending our money on. Events changed, budgets changed, and I think there was a large consciousness of, I don't want you spending your money on me for this. I'd rather you reinvest in the mission, the thing I supported in the beginning. So I think we have to be really careful about what is the perception for some of the recognition that we do. Another factor is the booming growth in privacy concerns. Many people do not want their name tied publicly to the amount they give. They don't want, public recognition for their wealth, because it sends a lot of signals to people. I always say to people, someone asked me once, well, I want to put a Giving Society ribbon on everybody's name tag at an alumni event, and then have a key on the program that says this is what each ribbon means. And I said, well, that's going to be really tough, because you're going to get a financial advisor or wealth manager in the room who thinks that that is perfect field day, excuse me, for them to go after the people with the certain, with those certain ribbons, right? If I'm a financial advisor in the room, I want to go after all the people with the gold ribbons, because I know that they have that kind of wealth. Ewan has a good question. Do IRS rules apply to Canadian orgs giving gift to U.S. donors? They actually do. It's whether or not the donor receives a gift of any kind. So IRS applies to them. Um, that Vered, my friend Vered has a great comment. She says, I think donor honor rolls were invented by prospect research managers. Um, and we'll get into this, but I really do too, because that's what we did with them in large cities. We would take them from other organizations and hand them to our prospect researcher and say, here you go, here's all the donors to this organization categorized by amount. So enjoy. Um, and then the other concern we have to think about in recognition sphere is the lack of staffing and bandwidth. What is the best use of our time? Where can we get the most impact? And certainly focusing our time on things that don't have concentrated ROI is not a best use of our time. So let's look at the modern face of donor recognition. This is really what top performing shops, as I call them, or top shops are doing across the country. This is how we're expressing donor recognition. Everything from telling a donor story, we're going to talk about that, digital displays, so as opposed to a donor wall that might be static, moving that into the digital sphere. After all, we have to convince our leadership that it actually is 2014 and that the internet is over 20 years old. And so digital's okay. It's also great when you make a mistake. Lord, love a website when you make a mistake because you can fix it. Thinking about creative naming opportunities, not just the same old bronze plaque outside or their name in large font outside of a doorway. Nominating donors for awards. That is one of the heightened recognition activities that we can really get involved in. That way they're recognizing their community for their good work. And also we tie back to other philanthropic organizations. We'll talk about that. Recognition websites. Some folks have some really great and creative recognition websites where they're able to thank donors of all kinds, not just the large, donors with high dollar amounts. We're moving away from giving societies and into recognition societies, and that line is fine there, but I can tell you and explain to you what that means. And then instead of tchotchkes and items with your logo on it, understand that at a certain point of wealth, donors can buy anything they want. So, an item with your logo on it is actually something a donor can purchase. So what I like to do is custom books, the blurb books, the Snapfish books, or items that the donor cannot purchase, something that's really unique to them. So how do we shift the culture? A lot of you are probably saying, this is great, Lynn, that sounds wonderful. I'd love to get rid of my honor roll and change my giving societies and stop doing all this silly stuff. But how do you shift the culture? My vice president or my AVP or my fundraisers are never going to go for this. And so here are some of the things I do as a consultant with my clients. Number one, with the giving of tchotchkes, I rely on two things. Number one is the IRS, if you're in America, and the second is the Yale study that says that giving token items is actually counterproductive to giving. I'm sorry for those of you who are having sound issues. Seems like it may be isolated. I would check your connections, but you should be able to hear me strong right now. So you should be able to hear me for that. I like to use IRS and I like to use the Yale study for those. I like to prove the lack of return on investment. So I'm so sorry you guys are having sound trouble. Let me see if I can fix it, but I am not having any problems. Let me see if I should dial in instead of using. Let's see if that fixed the problem. Okay, so phone sound is working well. Okay. All right, so maybe it's the sound on your computer then, because a couple of people who are dialing in. All right, so I'm just going to move on, and hopefully you guys can fix it. If not, you can always watch the recording, okay? So I like to prove the lack of return on investment. A lot of our leadership is very hung up on what is the return on investment of our efforts. Well, if you have sat there and created 10 different giving societies and you have 0 people in one of them and one in another, and there's no tangible benefits, and nobody knows they're in a giving society, there's a lack of return on investment there. If you have spent the past 3.5 months getting your honor roll perfected, and it cost you $20,000 to print it, and there's no proof that listing a donor in that honor roll them give, then we got to move away from that. So it's a proof of lack of ROI. I kind of think about it as, for those of you who used to watch House, he used to have to eliminate diseases, so it was like diagnosis by elimination, rather than proof that it actually works. I like to change anecdotal evidence into empirical evidence. There is a lot I hear from both the frontline fundraising side and from folks that have direct contact with donors that say, oh, well, donor X likes so-and-so. That donor is really tied to this. And I say, that's great, but I'm programming for a large amount of donors, not for one. And so I really want us to focus on programming for our broader donor base, not just because you have one squeaky wheel. There are ways to fix the squeaky wheel and please that person, while at the same time putting forth a consistent, proactive donor recognition strategy. And also, I would question you and see if you've actually asked your donors what they value in donor recognition. I have yet to meet a donor who says that they would like their name listed in honor roll more than they would like a handwritten note. So there's nothing wrong with comparing those two and getting that data. And then I think that part of the reason we kind of get stuck in a rut is because we don't show people what the alternatives are. We may not have the creative ideas that we've stolen from another nonprofit, because that's what you do. You steal all your good ideas, right? So we actually have to show alternatives to WDITWA, which is, we've always done it that way. So let's move on there. And Miriam, I'm going to get to your question, don't worry. So let me show you some creative examples of great donor recognition and some other things that we can look at together. And then feel free to ask questions as we move forward. This is Alfred. Look at little Alfred in his turquoise bolo tie. This is from a great school in Colorado called the Colorado School of Mines, M-I-N-E-S, not mimes like making a box out of your hands. And I love this because as part of their donor recognition efforts, they tell the story of lots of different types of donors. So they tell Alfred's story, and it says Ireson is Mines' longest consecutive annual donor to the President's Council. So they are telling his story because he's the longest consecutive donor to their President's Council. So it's not just because he's given a large gift, it's because of the type of consistent giving he's had. He's also deeded his home to the school. I just want to know who gets the bolo tie if he goes, or that sexy flowered chair that he's sitting on. But oftentimes, I know you guys are all laughing because now you're looking at the sexy flowered chair behind him and not paying attention to me. But I think that oftentimes I ask a room full of fundraisers when I do conferences, how many of them know the donor who's given the most amount of money to the organization? And everybody's hands shoot up. When I ask them who the longest consecutive donor is to an organization, maybe 10 hands in a room full of 200 people. And that person, that Alfred, is just as important. Mark, that's a great question. Mark's in Denver and Mines is in Golden, so they're not far apart. They publish this on their website where they tell donor stories. And I actually have someone from Mines on the line, so she can type to you specifically what they've done with Alfred's story. But this is on the web. That's where I found it. So it's a great opportunity to tell the story of the donor who doesn't get told often. So kudos to them. This is from Boston University. They have a donor recognition webpage, which I think is a great, great use of your time. I think that if you have young interns, if you have student workers, building a website is a great way. If you have a communications department that's donor relations friendly, there's nothing wrong with taking donor stories that already exist and publishing them in a different format. So my friend Jen runs the program at BU, Boston University. Oh, Melissa included the link for all of you who want to see it, of Minds's, but Minds, I guess, would be the plural of Minds. This is Boston University's donor stories page. And what is great about this page is this is the top of the page over on the left. And then on the right is the bottom of the page where you can sort the donor by, you can look at their stories by like where they give, English, law, medicine, other. And then as you can see, the donors are different types of donors. They've got a young person, they've got a couple, you know what I mean? They've got a dual degree, just a really great way. And again, I'm not suggesting that you have to reinvent the wheel here. What I'm suggesting is that you take the donor stories that have been in your magazines, you take the donor stories that already exist in your pieces. They have Batman. They do. I know. Who knew? Who knew that Boston University has Batman? And maybe if they're on the line, they can explain that. But hey, it's worth a look to go look and see who Batman is and why he gives to BU. I haven't read the story. Sorry, Varen. But they repurpose and reuse the stories, and I think it's a great way to express those donor stories. And that's a great question. So Anne asked, how often do I suggest changing these stories? I think that maybe once a quarter you could swap out new stories. I don't know how often BU or Minds does it, but I would also keep the catalog of the stories you've already covered on the website. So at Yeshiva, we added a new donor story every month. But if you don't have that kind of bandwidth, definitely you could do it once a quarter, maybe twice a year. But remember, websites are not something you put up and then forget. It's something I'm constantly doing with my web person is, okay, what new content can we add this week? How do the front may look the same, but underneath the pages, you want to always have something new to refresh. And I'm a big proponent of once you have these stories on the web, then using them to share on social media. So Yale has a good question. Yale has a good question about donor privacy. She said, you mentioned about privacy. This is very public. Would that be a problem? Every single person that's featured in these stories has been gone to by someone in their donor relations shop, asked if they could use them as their profile. They've gotten their permission. And I think if we look here at Alfred's story, it doesn't talk about the amount of his giving. It talks about the depth and the breadth of his giving. So, I think that's a very good way to do that. If you want to see a unique idea, something that I didn't put a slide up, and I'm very mad at myself for not doing it, but Whitworth, I work with them. They do something on social media called Gratitudes. You could totally steal that. It's called Gratitudes, and if you go on their Facebook and on their Twitter, it's all about giving gratitude to their donor. Every Tuesday they do donor profiles and Gratitudes. So something really great to do there. The University of Montana also, excuse me, does a really good job talking about donors on their social media. Miriam has a good question. I really like BU's approach. Are there any legal issues that are good to use for donor permission? I know that my friend Erin Moyer has a recognition kind of permission form at South Carolina. When I made my gift, they had me fill out a form that said, here's what I'm comfortable with, here's how I'd like my name to be used, all that stuff. I don't know there's much legal issues as much as it is being kind to the donor and letting them know the possibilities for use. And then the other thing you could do is always look for good recognition gifts. Well, you could take Alfred's story, you could print Alfred's story on really nice paper and have it framed. So even though it's a website story, you could have this framed and give it to him as a gift to hang on his wall. So there's a train that's going to come through my neighborhood, and there's nothing I can do to prevent the train noise. This is the hazards of working from home. I'm going to have to figure this out, or either go to a nice quiet place like an airport lounge or something. I'm sorry in advance for the train you're going to hear. But hey, it's 1:24 p.m. on the East Coast. That means the train's coming. So when I talk about those books, if you did a series of stories, you could put together a donor recognition book. I have been doing donor books for a while. I use Blurb. Other people use Snapfish or iBooks, or you can basically use whichever ones you want. I like Blurb because they're easy. Anybody can build a book on Blurb. They're very cost effective. I can always find a coupon for a Blurb book. Usually they're about $29, but I can usually get a coupon to get me down to $16. Um, so I like Blurb books. What I tend to do is if a donor gives to a lot of different areas, if you have an event where you're focusing on someone, we take the photos and we put them together in a beautiful hardbound book. It has a dust cover and everything. And you can print as many as you need or as few as you need. Um, and so I just find that they are the best gift. I've talked to many donors who've received them, people in New York who have given and gotten everything under the sun, and they consistently say that the custom book is what they desire. One of the things you can do to make it easier on you is you could have your communications or your graphic design team set up a template for your books in Blurb or in Snapfish, and then you just pop in the text and the photos as you need to. So, oh, Lisa has a great point. She says if you save points from Coca-Cola products, you can get good deals on books from Shutterfly. See, I am the queen of a coupon. I love it. Thank you so much. So there's another tip. For those of you that have done books, you know how meaningful they are. I wrote an entire blog post on them, but I really think Blurb books in general, custom books are just really classy way to go for low cost. So let's talk about nominating folks for awards or getting involved in recognition. Many of you know that you have, oh, there you go. Verid has another tip for you. Right now, Groupon and Living Social has major deals for photo books because of the holidays. Buy up the coupons and use them all year. Great idea. Absolutely phenomenal. Thanks. See, I love this community because we help each other so much. So my next idea is all of you, no matter where you live, especially those of you in Canada, have a wonderful AFP chapter, Association of Fundraising Professionals. And Catherine, I'll answer your question as soon as I get done here. And your AFP does National Philanthropy Day every year, and they're constantly looking for people to take awards like Young Philanthropist of the Year, Philanthropist of the Year, things like that. And I thought this example was a really great example of really coming together. So every year, I always nominate a philanthropist as part of donor recognition for Philanthropist of the Year until they win, and then we nominate another one until they win. It's not a lot of work. You fill out some forms, but I liked this because this Philanthropist of the Year, Barbara and Larry Keller, were a couple. They were nominated by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different nonprofits. They did it together. So they were nominated by the University of Cincinnati, Clever Crazes for Kids, the orchestra, the day school, the ballet, and the CET. All came together to put together one nomination. Okay? And it talks about their giving to all different places. And that's a great idea for those of you at universities. Partner with your local nonprofits where they also give. And nonprofits partner with the universities and tap into their resources to nominate someone for National Philanthropy Day. Great experience there, and the donors absolutely love it. I have yet to meet a donor who doesn't love winning a philanthropic award. Catherine asks a great question. What's the content of the recognition book and how many pages? I like to keep them under 20 or 30 pages. I like to keep them photo heavy and text light. And for example, I was on the phone with someone this morning and she said, we have this donor, she's given to lots of different areas across campus. She has, a great interest in students and student law. And so we were creating together a day where the donor would come and experience life as a student. and then she would have lunch with some scholarship students, and then go to a class or a mock trial, and then in the afternoon we were going to have the donor host a little cookie and tea reception in the dorm that her name is on, so that students could stop by to say thank you. And so we're going to document that by having a photographer there the whole day, and then we're going to make a custom book of what her day was like on campus. So that's the kind of book I like to put together. Really meaningful, thoughtful, something they can have out on their coffee table conversation piece. Okay, how many of you know that the Wall Street Journal has a donor of the day? It's usually every Wednesday. The Wall Street Journal has this huge section on philanthropy. Many of us think of the Chronicle of Philanthropy or the Chronicle of Higher Ed, but the Wall Street Journal does a really good job at covering philanthropy and donors. And so another way for you to get to have donor recognition is for you to nominate your donor for Donor of the Day for the Wall Street Journal. It's a really simple form you fill out, and again, you submit someone until they win, and then you move on to the next person. It's simple, it's easy. This is what happens. You Google Donor of the Day, Wall Street Journal, and they all come up. So a simple, quick win. Again, I want to give you things for donor recognition that don't require a lot of budget money, that don't require a lot of resources and staff time. Mark, yes, you advise the donor of the nomination before you submit it. So, that's what I would, on the recognition form, it would be great if you asked them, do you mind if we nominate you for an award? Something like that. And then that kind of takes care of it. Okay, let's talk about bronze for a little bit. How many of us have permanent recognition displays that we realize weren't exactly the best idea a long time ago? I probably have one of the worst donor wall stories in the world. I've told many of you the donor wall story that I had, but basically they brought stone over from Jerusalem. They had it hand chiseled and then backfilled with 24 karat gold for $1 million lifetime cumulative donors. And the person that did the wall did it in alphabetical order. And when Bernie Madoff was the chairman of the board, that was fine. And then when he went to jail, that wasn't fine. So we had to sandblast Bernie Madoff and Ezra Merkin's name off the wall. So in the middle of the donor wall is this big white blank space, which I now realize I could have replaced with my friend Debbie Myers' name all along and solved the problem. But it made for an awkward looking wall. It also made for the fact that if we got new $1 million donors, you couldn't add them because they wouldn't be in alphabetical order. And it's just, I think about that monolith and go, oh my goodness, is that really the best use? So I think you have to work with the signage that you have existing, but I want to advise you of this. If someone comes to you and says, I'd like to put up a plaque, or let's put up a donor wall, we just finished a campaign, here's what I'd like to tell them. I think that's great, but for similar cost, we can do something digital. I think permanent recognition is fine, but let's just say that names don't always last forever. We all know the Bill Cosby, lately his name is being pandered around about what they're going to do. He stepped down from boards. I've dealt with Bernie Madoff and Lance Armstrong and countless other people. Think about Donald Sterling, and so I am a big proponent in 2014 of digital. I'm also a big proponent of you don't have to do a donor wall. Okay, Mandy has a great question. Has anybody abandoned their donor walls? I'd love for you guys to contribute. Does anyone not have any donor walls? If you don't, let Mandy know what organization you're from so that she can benchmark with you. So Mount Royal doesn't do them. But if you don't have any or you're not planning to do any in the future, go ahead and let them know. Right there in the chat feature, you can tell Mandy. I think that donor walls have all good intent. I think that they're good intent. I think that there you go, Mandy. They're coming in. That's awesome. That's awesome. So I think that we as a culture are moving away from permanent walls. I think we're moving much towards what you're seeing on the screen now, which is a nice frame surrounding digital screens that can be used for other communication, not just names. Um, that's a good question, Alyssa. I don't know who the vendor was for Seattle Culinary Academy's digital display, but I'm sure we can find out. Marion has multiple donor walls for different groups and campaigns. Laura at Cornell College has removed ours, and they're going digital. Um, Ewan has it only for his building, no other walls, so that's good. I think that walls for giving societies and things are really moving by the wayside. I think that digital can tell a story. You can show videos. You can fix it at any time. This is another idea. This is at the World War II Museum in New Orleans. I take photos of donor walls. I have a disease. My friend Kathleen said that she brought her nieces and nephews, and every time they go into one of the museums, they have to look at the donor wall. I'm glad to know I'm not the only person that looks at donor walls in places. I often think about the amount of money that they could have spent on other things, but that's okay. I think donor walls have their place. I just think for amounts of giving, it's not. I like this kiosk idea because this can be moved. And remember, what happens if you go to renovate that building? What are you going to do with that wall? Um, you know, how much visibility are you going to get? And what is the ROI? Hospitals have a good way of doing donor walls. They do leaves. They've got some creative ways there, but I really think that you either have to go combination digital, and like Dolores in Joplin, Missouri has combination digital and glass panels. Here's what I don't recommend. I don't recommend etching things in stone. I don't recommend alphabetizing names. Okay. That's a great one. Vered loves brick pathways. Um, yep. I That's great. Dolores, some folks want you to email them a picture. If you want to, you can send it to me and I'll send it out to everyone. If you wanted to show off your donor wall, maybe I should have a donor wall section on my website. That's a great idea. I'm adding that to my list of things to do now. Thanks, everybody. The good, the bad, and the ugly, maybe, or the things you'd like to tear down or stuff like that, but also the things to brag on. Um, so that's a good idea. If you don't have to do one, don't do one. Um, the walls of shame. Yeah. Um, that's a great idea, Becky. Our donor wall has an inexpensive changeable acetate piece so they can change it if they need to. That's a great idea. I recommend if you can't go digital, go with something that's either vinyl lettered or acetate, something you can change out. I recommend not taking up dead space just because the space is there. And here's the other thing. So you invest 30, 40, maybe $100,000 in a donor wall. What could you do with your donor relations program? What could you do with donor recognition otherwise? So that's the argument I put, because unless someone physically comes to your location, they don't get to see it, and they may get to see it once or twice a year. So think about that. I think there's a time and a place for naming opportunities. And I tread carefully here because there's lots of good people in the industry. There's lots of good companies out there that do good work. I just think that the time for the bronze idea, the static idea that never changes, is gone. I'm not a fan of donors who cry foul and want them updated or do expensive, additions. You know what? We can find other ways to recognize them. So that's kind of my spiel on permanent recognition. Just be very careful about permanent recognition. And I'm not the only one that's ever gotten burned by it. I've seen lots of mistakes in public and private places both. So I'm going to kind of flip the page so that we keep moving here. The next topic I'd like to cover is giving societies. There's a lot of talk about giving societies, but not a lot of research. And I think that's very, very telling. Far too often I hear, well, we need a giving society for that. And I say, not necessarily. there has been no, and maybe I'm going around the country asking this. Maybe somebody has research I don't know about. There's been no statistical evidence that says that putting a donor in a giving society makes them give more, or that by calling them pewter instead of bronze, they want something better. They want to give you more money. So I think giving societies are an artificial construct of fundraisers trying to recognize donors. I think that unless you're at a private liberal arts school, an Ivy, Cornell University has wonderful. The Tower Club, everybody knows they want to be in the Tower Club. They know about it. It's steeped in tradition. It's like everybody identifies with that. But if you're young, if you're a nonprofit, I don't see any reason to have giving societies in the traditional means based on dollar amount. As a matter of fact, I'm a much bigger fan of recognition societies. So here's what I think you have to have. And so my friends at Auburn, I love them dearly. I went to visit, and we were doing a donor relations assessment, and one of the assessments we did was on their giving societies. So I had them bring out all the levels of the giving society, and so we were giggling and drinking tea, as I call it, and these were all the pins you could have had on your lapel based on your giving. And the one there with the arch, is the little pointed thing, actually is a small weapon if you use it properly. And look at those classy rhinestones. And they know I'm making fun of them, so don't think that I'm being mean. I love my Auburn folks, but this is comical. So we're going to have to redo them. And do you know how all these levels, so the ones with arch, the George Petrie Society, the reason there's all those levels is because one donor wanted it. One donor voiced his opinion. Now he's a bigger donor, and so they created all these unnecessary levels in their giving societies to please him. So there are some universities and some places that are doing giving societies really well, recognition societies. The best, the original, of course, is Carnegie Mellon. Debbie Myers and Paige Eubanks Barrow redesigned their giving societies. They got rid of the ones that weren't working. They kept the ones that were, and then they redesigned them all with these beautiful looks. So as you can see, they're consistent. They have that circular effect. So they have a loyalty society. They have a Loyal Scott. They have an annual giving society, and then they have lifetime givers. And then they also have a planned giving society. But you can see the cohesion here. I want to show you another. Wake Forest recently redid theirs. And as you can see, again, they're very good looking. They've rebranded it. And of course, Paige left Carnegie Mellon to go to Oklahoma State, where she and Christy Racy have redesigned their giving societies. And I will point out something that I really love about what they've done. Far too often we have giving societies named after people, so I'll pick on Carnegie Mellon because I know they're on the phone and they won't mind. But as you can see, there's the John C. Warner Circle, or the Heinz College's Dean Circle, or the W.L. Mellon Society. So many times we hang up on people's names, so we put people's names attached to them, and we all know that might be dangerous. So Oklahoma State did something that I thought was really brilliant. They took words from their alma mater and use them for their giving society. So loyal and true is one of the stanzas in the alma mater. And so they named their giving societies, their recognition societies, off of different words they found in their alma mater, which I thought was brilliant because the likelihood of the alma mater changing is little to none. And they really do a great job of explaining it. You can Google their recognition societies. They're all online. They're fantastic. They have Proud and Immortal as well for their planned giving. But I love this. They even know, and they have it to find out what types of gift qualify them. So here's kind of my spin on recognition societies. Keep it simple, stupid. When I got to yeshiva, there were 19, and I left, there were 4. So here's the ones I actually think you need. I think you need something to recognize planned giving donors. I think that generation likes that kind of recognition. I think that it's valuable to have planned giving folks in a society together. I don't think you need a level within that society. You need one planned giving society. If they made a deferred gift to you, they're in. Really easy, really simple, right? I think you need You don't have to create a society, but I think you need some program for your loyal donors. As many of you know, I'm a big fan of loyal donors. I think you need to do something for them. I think you need a lifetime cumulative giving society. So that's like the ultimate. And what I do when I'm building them at other schools is I take the minimum amount it costs to endow or name something, and I multiply that by 10, and that's the level. So if your minimum amount was $50,000, then your lifetime cumulative giving should start at $500,000. Krista has a great point. In defense of the named giving societies at Carnegie Mellon, they all are deceased people. Those are good. They can't damage us, and they're significant to the particular giving society. Much like what we did at NYU, we created the Willard T. Chevalier Society. He was dead, long gone, but he was the first $1 million donor to NYU's School of Engineering. So if you're going to name it, make sure they're dead. Good idea. So thanks, Krista, for the insight. Thank you so much. I think that very rarely do you need an annual giving society, maybe one level at the leadership level. But if you have bronze, pewter, platinum, gold, brushed silver, nobody is going to care. So what I question about is, especially for those of you who are in one-person shops, how much of this can you manage? Really, how much of that can you manage? And what is the return on investment? Are you seeing huge increases? Now, you may be at a school where it's a culture. So if you're at like a Yale and a Cornell, or places with long tradition, or Davidson where their giving percentage of their alumni is 60%, an annual giving society may work for you. But if your alumni giving percentage is 7 or 8%, giving societies aren't going to fix that problem. Nancy, you had a question about how I determine levels. For cumulative lifetime giving, when I do consulting, I say, what is the minimum level it costs to endow or name something? So at McMurray, what's the minimum to endow or name something? $25K? Okay. So then your minimum lifetime cumulative giving society should be $250,000. And the reason, my logic behind my math is that I shouldn't get into your cumulative giving society from just one gift, one major gift. It should be something that is a lifetime achievement type award, right? It should be something where I've contributed to you in many different ways. It should really be the highest of the high. So I don't want to get in with just one gift. Makes sense? Unless the gift is that much. Kimberly has a good question. For societies, is there a standard to consider pledges as opposed to cash in the door, and is soft credit? Soft credit is always included in my world. I wrote a blog post once that giving societies are like your third grade birthday party. You have to invite everyone. So I believe that matching gifts should be included, gifts in kind, soft credit, pledges, everything should be included. Because here's the thing. You're not harming anybody by adding them, and you're not going to kick them out of a giving society. So just include them. It doesn't hurt anyone to include those kinds of gifts. Athletics, things like that. Yes, including documented future intentions. Right. Donor advised funds don't allow for membership, and that's fine. They know that when they give through a donor advised fund. If you're at a school that has athletics programs, make sure you're counting their athletic giving, right? How do I feel about annual donor recognition dinners for both cumulative and annual giving societies? Well, annual giving societies, if you give them a dinner, you have to deduct that from their gift unless you invite prospects or other people, so be careful there. I don't like deadly donor dinners. That's what I call them, deadly donor dinners. How about you have a reception, a stand-up reception, and it's just a recognition event where you recognize all different types of donors, loyal, cumulative, annual, all in one room. So I try to avoid a deadly donor dinner at all costs. Because you know what's going to happen? You're going to overprogram them. And 3 hours later, they're going to be like, oh, God. I mean, is it an event that you would go to if you weren't paid to go there? So think about that. Another place that I saw, Mary Fisher, it's the same people every year, then it's not the right event, then it's not working. And we can talk about event metrics. Next month we're talking about events. Notre Dame has really redone their recognition societies. So if you Google Notre Dame recognition societies, you can look at theirs, and I think it's really well done. So another great place to benchmark. All right. I'm going to get into this quickly and briefly, and many of you know that I have written kind of the blog that started a war almost online. Um, I I don't know how it happened. I wrote a blog. Well, I know it happened. I wrote it. It said that the honor rolls of donors are the biggest thing we can do to waste our time in fundraising. They prove no ROI. They're poorly used. They violate privacy. I mean, I could just list a million nightmares. You always screw up the one name you can't afford to screw up. They never are worth their salt. And for your advancement services and your staff, it is a nightmare to do honor rolls. So instead, I propose that you do away with your donor honor roll. If you have to bargain, you can try to do it digitally, and then you count the number of clicks that it gets in a year, and then figure out that that's not worth it. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not worth it. I'm happy. If anybody wants me to personally talk to their vice president, I will be happy to talk to your vice president or your CEO or your president or anybody and talk to them about donor honor rolls. You just email me and we can set up a call with those folks. And I promise to be respectful and not pee in your pool, as my friends would call it. Most people have done away with them in print. Oh, good. There's a VP in the room and is nodding her head solemnly. I'll talk to you, VP. I will. They're nonsensical. They're a list. They don't tell a story, and they don't show impact. So with all the resources that you put, the time, the money, the effort into a list of names that I'm just going to take and give to a researcher at another nonprofit, show impact. This is great. It says leveling the playing field, and each of those are a clickable story. Many of you have seen the impact report that we did at Whitworth. At Shiva, we stopped the donor honor roll. It cost us $110,000 a year, and we started telling impact stories. I have yet to meet an organization that said, I did away with my honor roll of donors and our giving fell down through the floor. And nobody gave to us ever again. So when they meet that, oh, Kimberly said, I shared your blog on honor rolls last year with my college's leadership, and this year they are gone. Yay, that makes me so happy. You should have a drink about that. I have gotten multiple people who wrote me back who said, I brought your blog to my leadership and they eliminated the honor roll. So if you need it in writing, it's there on Academic Impressions and also on my website. So let me get to a couple questions before we close out. But it's the worst thing you can do with your time, and nobody enjoys it, and your data people will thank you forever if you fight to get rid of them. Now, if it's get rid of the donor honor roll or keep your job, I'm all about staying employed. Well, I quit my job, but yeah, I'm all about you guys staying employed, right? So understand, pick your battles, but this is one to kind of stake your claim on for proactive strategic donor relations. Nothing is more reactive than a donor honor roll. All right, so Alyssa has a great question. Can you talk about donor newsletter and cutoffs for stories? A donor has given a certain amount to have a story. Aha, Alyssa. My proposal is that we don't base stories on the amount they've given, but that they have a unique angle. So at my alma mater, they told the story, I so got into this story, of two parents whose son was going to University of South Carolina, and they started a scholarship fund because he was able to receive financial aid, so they wanted other people. So kind of legacy. Or what about telling the story of the longest donor? What about telling the story of someone who's given since they graduated? What unique stories is what you're looking for? You're looking for something you want to read, because far too often we're telling the mega $1 million donor story. And you know what? I'm never going to write $1 million check. I don't think, anyway, unless I don't think I'm going to be able to ever write $1 million check, nor that I'll do it in payments. But a lot of us can't relate to that. So what about the youngest planned giving donor? What about someone who pooled their family's funds to give a scholarship in honor of another family member? Those kinds of stories. Intrigue rather than amount. I hope that helps. Corey has a good question. Can you talk a little bit a little bit about recognition for campaigns, societies, donor walls, otherwise. I don't believe that you should create separate recognition societies for campaigns, separate walls for campaigns, separate anything. I think campaign gives you a nice opportunity to grab some budget money and do the societies, do the digital display, do things well. But I think just for the campaign is a little short-sighted. I would much rather you look far into the future, not about this campaign, about the next or the next. Oh, another great story is to tell the story of the monthly donor, somebody who gives to you every month. Okay. But I'm not a big fan of separate campaign recognition societies, things like that. You can do a campaign impact report, but it shouldn't have a list of donors in it. Here's a good question. In Muncie, Indiana, cool. Do we need levels in our President's Society, which is $1,000 to $19,999? What would the levels benefit you? What would be the benefit of doing that? That's my question for you. What would be the benefit of doing that? Emily, good question. I'm trying to understand the difference in recognition societies and giving societies. Recognition is based on a behavior and giving is based on an amount. I hope that, I mean, it's just A, I like it better. B, it focuses on the behavior of the donor, not the amount that they've given. Some can be on amount, but think about loyals, think about plan giving. They are in the plan giving society because of their behavior. They've made a deferred gift, not because of the amount of that deferred gift. So that's one way to think of it. And I think recognition is a much more sophisticated term than giving. So I just prefer it much better. Allison from Montana. Hi, Montana. What website organization is this Impact Instead page from? That's a good question. I need to find my source on that. I'll include it when I send the recording tomorrow. I took a screenshot in the middle of the night, so I'd have to find where I took the screenshot of. It's kind of what happens when I get inspired. Sometimes I sit with screenshots of examples I've taken for years. I'll find out for you and give it. Or you can take, let me find out. That's a good question, Pamela. Do you think that having donor levels encourages donor to move up to higher levels? I actually don't. I think unless you're giving a benefit that changes, the only place I've seen that work is in athletics. It's from Queen's University in Canada, Allison. This is Queen's University in Canada. That's their donor recognition page. So that's where that's from. No problem. I knew it was from someone I knew. I think that donor levels doesn't encourage them to move up, not unless they're getting better seats or better parking. So that's my claim on that. Ewan, I work in a business school that has its own brand. Should faculties have separate societies from the universities? Oh, you have really stumbled onto something that is a little small annoyance of mine. I think the university should have central giving societies, and here's the ones that the university should have over the units. Cumulative lifetime should be university-wide. Loyalty should be university-wide. Plan giving should be university-wide. The only ones that should be broken out by the faculties, or in the United States as we call them, the colleges and the units, is annual giving. They can have like a dean's club or like a leadership gift level, but then they need to make sure that here's the problem with non-centralized giving societies, Ewan. I am not married, but if I were married and my husband was a business school graduate and I'm an engineering school graduate, which I'm not, and we each gave $1,000 to our units, to our faculties, to our colleges, and he got lauded over and got included in a $1,000 club and I didn't, we're going to have a problem, right? If he's got a fancy lapel pin, not that that's what people want, but I'm just joking. We have a problem there. So it has to be equitable. Okay. So I'm big fan of centralizing giving societies and then trying to give guidelines for the units for their giving societies. So those of you who are at decentralized places, and at Oklahoma State, they just did a big audit of all their giving societies. We did it at Auburn too. And we got to rein in some stuff. And so that's something really there. So what's the takeaways from today? And if I didn't get to any questions, please email me. This is my full-time job now. So I'm full-time plus, so please email me. I'm happy to answer any questions. Let me give you my contact information. Guys, we have over almost 3,000 people in our LinkedIn group. So if you have a question, you can always ask it there too. We get lots of great responses, but you can always email me directly. I'll always answer. It might take me a day now, but I'll always answer. Here are our takeaways. Challenge tradition. Think about modern donor recognition versus what we've always done. Think about how to translate this to your leadership by proving non-ROI. And think about creative ways to recognize donors, both publicly and privately, that they actually enjoy. Okay? That remember that every donor doesn't want their name on something. Every donor doesn't want to be a member of whatever, nor is that something they value. Ideally, yes, we'd have time to customize every donor's experience, but we don't. So when we think, I want you to think broad, far and deep, right, about what the donor experience is going to be at your organization. Okay? Thank you all so much. I could not have gone out on my own without my webinar subscribers. You guys, I do this for you. I hope to keep them. Also, I am currently soliciting for webinar topics I've got them all the way through June of next year. So I need to plan July through December. So if you have webinar topic ideas, email them to me. I would love to get your feedback. If you missed this, I'm recording it for you and your shop. But thank you all so much for your time. I hope you all have happy holidays, be it Hanukkah or, yes, I am teaching at AFP International in Baltimore, and I'm going to start posting my speaking engagements more on the web. But thank you all so much for your time, and happy holidays. I hope you spend the time with your family and with those that you love the most. So thank you.